and so much more.
Live and local.
Allen Stiles on Sactown Sports.
We have the Kings Roundtable coming up in an hour, and I believe we will be fully loaded. Brandon Nunes, Frankie Cardicelli, and Chris Watkins.
We bring the boom. That's what we do.
Why does Frankie get the? Why is he the only one with a sounder? They all deserve sounders.
We got to come up with one. He's also the guy with all the nicknames, right? He's the King's Cowboy. He's the Pizza Cowboy. He's the
King's Cowboy. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, he was originally the King's Cowboy. And then at Media Day a couple years ago, he took the last slice of pizza before other people had pizza. So he became the Pizza Cowboy. That's why we play that dumb Kid Rock song every time he comes on. It's because he's the King's Cowboy.
We'll ask Frankie about that on the air. They join us in an hour. But right now, it is time to have a conversation about somebody we are removing from the ban list for today. Not sure how long we will have him removed off the ban list for. Not Kyle Kuzma, but the one, the only, Cam Johnson.
I was going to guess John Collins.
He'll be coming up soon here shortly. Cam Johnson goes 6'8". He's 29 years old. He turned 29 in early March. He was drafted to the Timberwolves in the first round. He was the 11th overall pick. He is a power forward that is kind of known as a marksman, a sharpshooter. He played 57 games this season, and in those 57 games, 18.8 points per game, 6 points more than his career average, 4.3 rebounds per game. That's better than his 3.9 career average, 3.4 assists per game. That's better than his 2 assists career average, 47.5% from the field, better than his 45.3% career average, 39% from three, that ties his career average, 89% from free throw. That's 4 points better, 4 percentage points better than his career from the free throw line. Just a career year for Cam Johnson. What's not to like? Okay, we've talked about him before, what he is going to be able to do for the Kings if he is a part of the Kings or any team really. And the biggest issue with Cam Johnson, it's always been, one, his price tag, or one, his availability, and two, his price tag because of that availability. He's about to get paid $20.5 million. It's an outstanding contract. Now, look, he's 29 years old. He's going to be 30 next March. He's owed 22.5 next season, so 2 years left on his deal. The Nets have really dragged this thing out. It's gotten really quiet, which is either a really good thing or a really not so good thing with the Nets and Giannis. It's gotten real quiet. And if Giannis goes to the Nets, they are not moving Cam Johnson because they're trying to win. Unless they got some type of win now haul back, which I don't think they would, they are not moving Cam Johnson. So the Nets, let's assume they do not get Giannis, so they decide, let's just blow this thing up. Cam Thomas as well, making decisions on him and certain guys. So Cam Johnson is on the way out. So Allen, $20 million a year, right in the middle of his prime. The timeline is perfect. What's not to like? Well, I'll tell you what's not to like. Games played for Cam Johnson all throughout his career. Actually, as I'm going through this. Games played, okay? This season, he played 57. Last season, he played 58. The season before that, he played 42. In 2022, he played 66. In 2021, he played 60. His rookie season, he played 57. This brother has never played more than 66 games in a season. That's bad.
That is not healthy.
That is bad. And if I'm doing a deal, that is the first thing I'm telling the Nets. You ran out of time with him. I think the Nets should have moved him this season. Now, people like me that are getting paid a lot more than me are sitting looking at this saying, we want Cam Johnson, but things are flipping for you, Nets. And if you don't get Giannis, we know you're blowing it up. And you got a dude who's never played more than 66 games with 2 years left. And yeah, it's a good contract, but there are a lot of good contracts out there. Is it crazy, Kyle, based on what we talked about? I know it's a 1-year deal, but going to our trade and I know it's a wing-driven league, but going to our trade candidate from yesterday, is it crazy to say that people might be more interested in a Kobe White than a Cam Johnson at this point? 4 years younger, 1 year on the deal. Cam Johnson was a sexy, sexy name, and maybe I'm just making this up myself, but you look at the lack of games played, and the season is over now. He had that ankle, and we had this conversation. You need to move this man. He had the ankle thing happen. He doesn't even get to 60 games this season.
I think the answer to your question depends on what role you envision Kobe White to be. Because like Cam Johnson, we know what his role is. He's a number 4, right? Mm-hmm. He's a number 4 on a team that is trying to contend. He is a far more efficient shooter than Kobe White, but he's also taking like 4 less shots per game and is a better defender, right? Mm-hmm. You're getting a 3-and-D guy who is going to shoot 39% from 3, right? You know what you're signing up for with Cam Johnson. With Kobe White, there's a little bit of flexibility because, like, what do you envision Kobe White being after this one season? Or do you envision him being a more traditional point guard who only is scoring 15 points a game, right? Mm-hmm. I think you have to have some vision with Kobe White. With Cam Johnson, you know what you're getting, and I think that's why so many teams were reluctant to part with the 2 first-round picks.
No, there's no way. Tag. That is insane.
I'm not saying it's insane. I'm saying
I am saying it's insane.
Brooklyn's going to have to compromise somewhere. And there were reports from, I think it was Nets Daily, which is a very fun follow on Twitter if you want to follow him. He's like an 82-year-old guy who's like super plugged in. Mm-hmm. That was like the Nets are maybe trying to use Cam Johnson to move up in the lottery so they can get 2 lottery picks this year, which tells me A, they're not getting Giannis, which of course they're not going to get Giannis. They're not going to be able to compete with Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton and draft picks when, you know, other teams are offering Karl Anthony Towns or, you know, some combination of whatever the Spurs have. So if they're not getting Giannis, I think they're in the camp of we're just going to go completely young team and
you know what, Kyle?
Open roster spots.
You know what, Kyle? I don't like this at all. In about 4 minutes, we're going to break down the trade candidates and how the Kings would get him. Another guy that we talked about this week, if they don't, I don't think we just talked about how the Warriors cannot keep Draymond and Jimmy Butler. If they wanted to get Giannis, one of them would have to go. If the Nets don't get Giannis and they go in blowout mode, isn't that kind of seamless Cam Johnson for Kuminga? Isn't that kind of perfect?
Well, they don't even have to do that because they can just sign Kuminga outright. They don't even have to do a
I guess that's
trade.
the savior. I guess that's the saving grace.
They can technically do both, but I think it more depends on what they want to do with the draft picks, right? I'm just going to go to Tankathon real quick because you remember all those young guys they had that came into Sacramento and beat the Kings earlier this year? It was I
remember it well, yes.
It was, Noah Clowney and
Cam Thomas must have played. He played in that game.
I'm sure he probably did, but they've got all those young guys now who they're kind of trying to figure out how they all fit together. Then you also throw in Brooklyn this year, as it stands right now, and this could change. They currently have pick 8, pick 19, pick 26, pick 27, pick 36 in this year's NBA draft. So they're going to get 5 rookies as it stands right now.
Crazy.
Potentially roll into that locker room, and they're going to want to make space for some of them. I understood when the Nets Daily report came out that they're maybe trying to jump back into the top 10 by trading pick 19 and maybe Cam Johnson. I think it makes sense from their standpoint, because their path to turn it around is going to be with just a gluttony of young players and kind of doing what Detroit is doing and kind of figure out which one of them are going to work and which one of them aren't going to work.
Yeah, I'm looking here. And they're already super young, so I don't know what they're going to do with all these dudes. I mean, you get just random guys, and you look up and they're all 20. Besides Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton is 26. Cam Johnson's 29. Then after that, Noah Clowney is 20. Derek Whitehead is 20. Keon Johnson is 23. I don't know if any of these guys are going to be good, but Jalen Wilson, 24. Maxwell Lewis, 22. My boy, Drew Timme. I hope you cooked up a Drew Timme in one of those deals, Kyle. He's only 24. How many people thought Drew Timme was 27? I'm raising my hand.
I thought Drew Timme was 38 in college.
Drew Timme is 24 years old.
Drew Timme is my age. That is crazy.
God bless him. Tyrese Martin is 26. So a ton of young players. I don't know how much young talent they have. And they're going to get another crop of five?
At least 5. Plus cap space to sign somebody in free agency like a Kuminga if they so choose. Yeah, it's interesting. It depends what they want to do, right? Because are they clearing out space for a new... If they trade Cam Johnson, are they doing it for a Kuminga, or are they trying to go completely young and say we're going to start 4 rookies and Claxton?
I don't know. There does come a point where, and yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with Claxton. There does come a point where, yeah, we essentially are tanking, but we want somebody that's somewhat established, and that's why Kuminga, to me, works for them, because you know that he's got some talent, right? And I know the Thunder have a ton of picks too, but this is different. The Thunder, they have picks almost for fun at this point. The Nets have to hit. So if you're choosing between we have to hit on these guys versus we can get Kuminga, who we know just needs more of a runway, I think that's a better gamble than just a bunch of draft picks, because you're not hitting on all of those picks.
Yeah.
Let's get to the other side. When we return, Kyle has cooked up how many trades today, Kyle?
2
trades to acquire one Cam Johnson. Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports.
Hey.
How can the Kings acquire the trade target, the trade candidate of the day? Cam Johnson, 29-year-old, 18 points per game, but the brother has never played more than 66 games in his career. So that price tag is going to be fascinating. Let's get right on into it, Kyle. I said yes to both Kobe White deals yesterday because, look, 26 and under, I'm normally going to, especially if you've already proven you can do some things, I'm normally going to say yes versus the young talent that the Kings have, simply because I think that age range is kind of perfect because you can make everybody happy. That's why, and we're going to talk about Jonathan Kuminga here in about 15 minutes, but that's why the 22-year-olds, if you want to hold on to Domantas Sabonis, but 25, 26, you're coming into your own, and that's why I like that. Cam Johnson goes 29. He will turn 30 next March, and the injuries have been an issue, which is so funny, Kyle, because, and we're about to get to the trades that Kyle cooked up. But what would you consider Cam Johnson, right? Obviously, he's not the level of injury prone. There's Zion and there's Ben Simmons, then there's Zion, and then you have guys like Cam Johnson that I'm missing 20 games, bruh. Like I'm gonna be there for about 50, maybe 60. But I'm missing a solid 20 a year. What is that?
The constantly on the injury report guy.
Yeah.
It's like we go into every game and it's just questionable, doubtful, questionable. Always got some nagging injury.
Something. Just something kind of, and I'm not saying whether they can play or not, but just always banged up. Those are just, that's the category. Injury prone, and then there's banged up. He's just banged up.
I will say, in his defense this last year, I just pulled up his injury history. He had those ankle injuries around the trade deadline, which was, I think, what kept him out for I know they were trying to trade for him in December, and then in January the talks tied down because he got hurt with the ankle.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the Brooklyn Nets were tanking.
That's also
games
true
in here. There's some rest days in here where the Nets were just tanking and kept him out.
All right, let's get to trade number 1.
All right, so let's take us all the way back to the trade deadline. Ooh, so back we're in the NBA trade deadline now. Remember how Cam Johnson was almost a King, and then he was almost a Warrior, and then he was almost a Laker. The reported deals at the time were the Kings were offering Kevin Huerter, Trey Lyles, a first-round pick, and a second. And the Brooklyn Nets wanted Devin Carter. Mm-hmm. And that was where the talks kind of died out, was the Kings weren't willing to include Devin Carter or an extra first-round pick. So that was kind of the end of the Cam Johnson conversation. So obviously we don't have Kevin Huerter or Trey Lyles anymore, but we can essentially offer that same deal, but put DeMar DeRozan in there instead. So the one I came up with is Cam Johnson for DeMar DeRozan and the Kings first-round pick next year. Brooklyn can either buy out DeMar DeRozan or, trade him to Miami, and then they get Wiggins, and then they can just figure out what to do with Wiggins after that. But it's essentially, from the Kings standpoint, Cam Johnson for DeMar DeRozan and a first-round pick.
So DeMar, a first-round pick for Cam Johnson.
Yeah, and then Brooklyn can figure out what to do with DeMar after that. I said, they'd send him for the Wiggins and second-round pick package. Just collect an extra second-round pick. Who cares?
And why would the Nets, are they going to try to move Wiggins?
Well, I'm just saying from the Nets standpoint, they just get a extra first-round pick for Cam Johnson.
Mm-hmm. And you could probably convince somebody to want Wiggins at some point. He's still only he's been in the league for 2 decades. He's still only 27.
Yeah, but I think the underlying point is, even if they trade Cam Johnson, they're going to have to pay somebody $20 million.
Man, I feel bad for Andrew Wiggins in that situation. But I'm doing it though. I'm doing it.
DeRozan and a first-round pick.
This is and again, if you look at DeMar DeRozan, it depends, right? And we've gone back and forth with DeMar DeRozan's value. If you look at DeMar DeRozan as essentially a sunk cost, then adding on a first rounder for 2026 is whatever. If you look at DeMar DeRozan as, hey, this number 2 to Kevin Durant thing, it could be real, then maybe the first rounder's too much, but I don't know. The Nets not doing it without a first rounder. So yeah, there's a rock and a hard place.
The Kings would probably be overpaying in this scenario because what does Brooklyn want DeMar DeRozan or Andrew Wiggins for? Mm-hmm. Brooklyn's doing it more so for the draft compensation, which is a strategy. They can only keep so many players on the roster. So, maybe this, by trading for DeRozan and waiving him, it potentially opens up a roster spot while keeping you above the salary floor if you're Brooklyn. But I would imagine Brooklyn might just say, hey, DeRozan, you want to come in and mentor these young guys? Or Wiggins, you want to come in and mentor these young guys, or do something like that? Maybe they bring back D'Angelo Russell in this situation, and D'Angelo Russell and Wiggins can finally play with each other for the first time, even though it feels like those two players have had the same career arcs.
Yeah, I would say that the Nets are essentially facilitating just a player in Andrew Wiggins that somebody could convince themselves to, hey, we're an Andrew Wiggins away, and we're still not that far removed from 2022. And I think that between the first rounder and the ability to probably move Andrew Wiggins at some point and then get more, it ain't going to be, maybe you just get some young talent.
Yeah, maybe maybe the way for them to get 2 first-round picks for Cam Johnson is to rehab DeRozan's image or rehab Wiggins' image and then flip them for an additional first-round pick later.
I would want Andrew Wiggins before DeMar DeRozan easy if I'm the Nets.
Well, yeah, but not necessarily for quality of player. It's more so the timeline.
Yes, it's just timeline. More people are going to see Wiggins at. I don't think he's 30 yet, and go from there. All right, Kyle. So I'm doing it. I don't want to give up the first rounder, but
what if I put a top 4 protection on it? So only if they win the lottery would they keep the pick.
I mean, like I said, I feel like you kind of have to do it. Here comes the value question. And clearly I've kind of talked myself out of being that high on Cam Johnson. And I might sound crazy here, but how much better is Cam Johnson than PJ Washington, right? Is it a first rounder better? I don't think so.
We were going to have to trade the first rounder for PJ Washington anyways, but you're also giving up DeRozan.
Yeah, you're giving up DeRozan.
Yeah, you're cashing out the DeRozan chip and a first rounder, which at least you have 2 years left on Cam Johnson's contract.
I think I just talked myself out of it. You
talked yourself into PJ Washington.
I talked myself into, I don't really know how good Cam Johnson actually is.
Okay, so before we get to the second deal, let me just lay out what the Kings would look like in this scenario. So you would have point guard playing 20 minutes, Zach LaVine, Cam Johnson, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis, and then coming off your bench, Keon Ellis, Malik Monk, Devin Carter, potentially Jake LaRavia, and Jonas Valanciunas.
Sounds like a 7-8 seed to me. That's what all these deals, man. This is why a month ago I just said, go get a big fish and stop wasting my time.
Well, now we're not. We've run out of big fish, so we're here back to Cam Johnsons.
We're back to the Cam Johnsons of the world. What's the second one?
All right, last deal is they capitulate on the Devin Carter demands and trade him to Brooklyn like Brooklyn wanted at the trade deadline. So it would be Devin Carter, Jonas Valanciunas for salary reasons, and a lottery-protected first-round pick next year in exchange for Cam Johnson and your pick of either Noah Clowney or Drew Timme.
Well, I'm taking Noah Clowney's 20. So
yeah, but how much do you like Drew Timme?
Well, I do like Drew Timme.
How much would you
add Drew Timme, and I'm doing it.
Would you actively give up a first-round pick if it meant pissing Dave off because he does not want Drew Timme on the Kings?
Oh, of course
Drew
I
Timme
would.
Looks like him.
Of course I would. So the first round pick is top 14 protected.
Yes. So if they trade Devin Carter for Cam Johnson and miss the playoffs, they still keep the pick.
Done.
Oh, so you weren't in on this at the trade deadline. At the trade deadline, you wanted to keep Devin Carter.
I did. Some of that was Kevin O'Connor. A lot of people saying he's the steal of the draft. I just think that, again, if we're having these conversations, do I want to do both? No. I would fight the Devin Carter and the top first, but it is top 14 protected. I'd fight it, but you are getting a 20-year-old Noah Clowney who we saw he can shoot and go to one center. We know that.
He's a power forward.
We know that. So, again, if we're going to continue to work around the fringes, unless you think Devin Carter is going to have you in tears in a couple years because you had that guy, which is a kind of a staple here in Sacramento, I do it. I know we're way over time. Speaking of Jake LaRavia, he sat down with Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, and you are not going to want to miss what he had to say about free agency and coming back to the Sacramento Kings. Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm.
Chuck McDowell.